Hello, and welcome to another video from Borland Architecture. I'm Roger Borland, and we're here because I've got a goal. Our goal is to help 1 million people create a legacy home, a home of real value that's going to last for generations. And to do that, we've set out a number of design principles and fundamentals that we follow in our work every single day. And we want to try and teach you about those and give you a bit more information on how this all works. So today we're going to dive into the first one of the 6, and that is timeless aesthetic, number 1. So let's break this down a little bit. What is it in the first place? So it's broken into, you can break it down to 2 parts, right? So the first part is timeless. And what does that actually mean? So it's about creating something that's going to last for generations. It's about avoiding the now, thinking about what's current at the minute and what has been current in the past. Those things fade quite quickly over time, and we want to try and identify those and eliminate them from the design. This is important because these things will put a date stamp on your building. They will put your building into a specific period of time. And whenever we're trying to create legacy, we're actually thinking we need to go beyond this. We need to try and create something that's going to last for a very long time. Second part is aesthetic. An aesthetic can be a little bit subjective. So we need to be a little bit careful about how we manage aesthetic in a building. Now, the principle of what we're talking about here is to try and create a legacy building. And so to do that, the principal idea of that is that a single family will pass this building through generations. And then whenever you think about that, you sort of think, well, it doesn't actually matter so much that this building needs to be neutral from that point of view. You can insert your own personality into it and have that read through in the design itself, because that is you and you're going to live with that for a long period of time. So the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, why are you building this, and what is the future plans of this building? Are you going to be moving the building on in the future and selling it to the wider market? Or are you thinking that this is definitely going to be the place that your family is going to be for generations, and you're creating a real new hub here? You're creating something that's going to be a legacy. So asking those questions from the outset is really important, and pairing these 2 ideas together of a timeless aesthetic that relates directly to you and your family is the important key to this. So why do we do this? We do this, first of all, to create a long-lasting appeal. We've been talking about legacies here. We're talking about future generations. It's a long-term vision. It's something that's going to be valid for future as well as for the now. So we want to be thinking about it from that perspective. And very often we fall into the trap of getting excited about design and following newspapers and Instagram and magazines and images and so on that are in these publications that are very exciting, right? But we need to ask ourselves, is this something that's going to work for a long-lasting appeal? So we need to break it down and understand it from the core of what the idea is and ask ourselves, is that a valid idea for the future? So it leads into also the thought about sustainability and value. So if we're going to be creating something for a very long period of time, fundamentally, that is sustainable. It means that we're not breaking it down. It means that we're not pulling it back out of the building, throwing it away and bringing something new in. If we build something that's going to last and has that thought put into it from the outset, much more likely that it's going to remain there for a long period of time. And that fundamentally is sustainable. Holds value in it, and that value is very specific to you and what you want to achieve, and that's a very important aspect of any design. The next part of this is personal satisfaction. Ultimately, you've got to love the building you're in. It's going to be your home. It's going to be the place that your family are hopefully going to thrive in. And to do that, you've got to surround yourself with things that you love. It's got to really allow you to relax. It's got to allow you to socialize. It's got to allow you to be energetic. It's got to allow you to live generally. It's your home. Think about it from that point of view. Think about the different things that you want to do in this space, and ensure that the aesthetic that you're putting into this building encourages that lifespan, that lifestyle, and in that lifespan over the generations as well. So it's not an easy thing to do, and that's why we're here to help. Okay, so how do we do this, and how could we help you do this? So the first thing that we always say to every client is think quality first. If we build something of high quality and think about it from a quality perspective, the chances are that it is going to last a lot longer. It is going to be the building that you're going to love for a longer period of time. So thinking about that quality and breaking down each of the design elements in that and ensuring that they have that longevity built into them and that quality. And that means that it doesn't require a lot of future maintenance, or at least the maintenance that it does require has been thought about and is considered, and it's manageable for you as a family, and you will continue to love those elements of the building, even if it does require that maintenance, because you know that in advance that needs to be done and taken care of in order to maintain that quality over generations. The next part is thinking about the framework of the building. We try and layer buildings as much as possible, and the architecture that we create tends to be a framework. It creates a backdrop to your life. It creates a neutral palette on which you can layer your fundamental life into over time. And these layers that we put into the building, they are easily adapted and changed. But the principal building itself, the framework, is something that we need to highly consider. It needs to have the flexibility built into it to allow for these other layers to be added and taken away over time. It also allows for the flexibility of the function of the space. So movable doors, operable spaces that can open and expand and contract and change purpose over time as well. So these ideas, and we'll touch on this more in the next video, which is to do with the functionality of space. But these things are creating this framework, and that framework is somewhat neutral, right? And so it becomes the backdrop, and then we can layer our colorful items and our artistic impression into the building on top of that. It doesn't mean that the building itself needs to be boring and just a blank canvas completely. It means that we can layer in lots of really inspiring spaces into this. We think about light, we think about air, we think about shadow, we think about composition of space, we think about the volume and how that reacts to us, how we react, to those spaces and our enjoyment of those spaces. And that leads on to the next one, which is really these classical forms and shapes that we bring into buildings. So thinking about things like curves in buildings, for instance. There's a lot of curves currently as a trend in architecture, and actually curves has been there for a very long time. The use of curves and arches, it goes right back to the Greek and Roman times and prior to that as well. And so these elements have stood the test of time well, but they need to be designed well. They need to be really considered and thought about. And an example is a curve that may be in the entry of your building, for instance, to lead you into the foyer of the building. That is a lovely feature in the building, and it's about the journey, right, to that place. But that idea needs to be then replicated along the journey somewhere else to strengthen that idea. And it's about this narrative, and journey is one of an idea of a narrative that you can add into a building. And in this case, these curves lead us through the building and create this journey. So in this instance, we might have a curve that leads us to the entry, and then maybe we have another one at the end of a corridor that leads you to the primary living space. And that sets out the primary route through the building, and these curves become a tool to do so. But if you started layering too many curves into that building, it dilutes that as a solution. So if you had arches and you had arched windows and arched doors and curves in all sorts of areas, the primary idea of these curves leading us there then get diluted and broken down. And so it's not actually creating the aesthetic, and the idea is getting diminished through these additional elements that you're adding into it. So think about paring the idea back. What is the purpose of it? And really strengthening that as much as possible by putting a few of these sparingly through the building, but very purposefully. And they will create the narrative and create the story behind the building. The next one's about balance and harmony. And so thinking about symmetry. Symmetry, again, has been a tool that's been used in architecture for millennia. It's a very important tool, and it relates to the human body. The human body generally is quite symmetrical. You've got two hands, you've got 2 feet, you've got 2 ears. Our body is typically symmetrical, and our body works well with elements that then are symmetrically designed. We are inspired by that. We feel calm and well rested in those spaces. It helps us function better. However, it's not a hard and fast rule. And sometimes, leading back to this idea of narrative again, you may want to deliberately break this and create an asymmetrical form. And you may do this for a number of reasons. You may find a facade for a building, for instance, may be relating better to the context of the street because it's asymmetrical. You may have a single-story bungalow on one side and a 2-story weatherboard house on the other side, and you may want the form of your building to react to what's happening on the street. Another example may be you might have an open plan living space, but you actually want to create a central focus in that space, which is asymmetrical in an asymmetrical placement within that design. So it could be a fireplace to one side of it that you want to draw the attention towards, and therefore you might create more of a design focus towards that side of the design. And that is an example of asymmetrical bringing in. But if you're doing that again, think about it from the narrative point of view. What is the reason for doing it? There needs to be a design purpose behind this, and that layers the aesthetic and makes it that story becomes quite timeless because it's easily read in the building. The last one on the how is really adding your personal touches into it. As I mentioned before, we want you to love the building you're in. You need to resonate with it. You need to be really comfortable there. And so adding your personal touch is done by putting these layers on top of the framework. And again, the framework should allow for that to be integrated into the building easily and adapted over time. So an example of layers are furniture, artwork, plants, curtains. These sort of elements are easily replaced and moved around and create different functionality in the space that over time, depending on what your needs might be. And they are relatively cheap and easy to maneuver and replace. You know, that's often the richness in the space is the layering of these different eras on top of each other that creates real depth within the space. So that's how we do it, and hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into the idea of timeless aesthetic. Thank you for watching, much appreciated. If you like this video, please like, subscribe and follow. And if you think somebody else might really enjoy this content and get some value out of it, feel free to share it and pass on this information as well. The next video is about the second fundamental design idea, and that is around the idea of functional simplicity. So we'll get into that in the next video, but thank you for watching. Much appreciated.